It's December 23rd, 1888, and we are in Arles, a small town in the south of France. The sunny Provence region was sought after by many painters at the time, and here in Arles, two of them live in one room, in the so-called Yellow House. Vincent van Gogh and Paul Gauguin. It's been exactly 2 months since the 40-year-old Gauguin came here to see his friend, who was 5 years younger. The visit was organized by Vincent's younger brother Theo, an art dealer who has supported Vincent all his life. But now he is seriously concerned about his brother's deteriorating mental state. Vincent suffers from anxiety attacks, uncontrolled states that he has no recollection of, delusions and inner voices. So Theo promises to pay Gauguin's expenses in Arles, just to keep Vincent accompanied and give him some optimism for life. At first it seems to be working out. The two men create together and their eccentric natures seem to be able to complement each other. Over time, however, their differing views on how to paint, Vincent's mental fluctuations and Gauguin's sense of superiority lead to arguments and increasingly violent conflicts. It all culminates the day before Christmas. That's when Gauguin tells Vincent that he can't go on like this, and that he will leave Arles. He wants to stay in a hotel for the time being. Desperate, Vincent takes a razor and in a fit of anguish cuts off a large part of his left ear. He then wraps it in paper and sends it to a 17-year-old cleaning lady at the brothel that he and Gauguin had been attending, presumably to give it to his friend. Gauguin's decision to leave is not changed by this, but Vincent nearly bleeds to death, and his next journey leads to a mental institution. He has a year and a half to live, which he spends mostly in deep sadness and loneliness. Yet, or perhaps because of this, over the next 19 months, he would create 250 beautiful paintings that stand out for their unique style, vivid colors, and unique view of the world, even the cheapest of which is now worth millions of dollars. Vincent van Gogh was born in 1853 in Zandert in the south of Holland. His parents were Protestants belonging to the Reformed Church, and he was related to preachers and art dealers. For a long time, there was no indication that he would become a painter. He did draw as a child, but he showed no significant talent. From the age of 16, he worked for a firm selling art objects, then attempted to study theology or worked as a lay preacher. None of these lasted. In fact, his struggle with himself started to change his personality. At certain times, his behavior was beyond what was normal and socially acceptable. At that time, no one considered it a manifestation of mental illness, but at best he made people feel uncomfortable in his company. At worst, he disgusted or frightened them. Thus, he spent most of his life on the fringes of human society, an unwanted and unloved outsider. Yet he himself longed for nothing more than friendship and a sense of belonging with other people. All the loves of his life were also unhappy. He always either received a sharp rejection or the girl's family was against him. In one case, when he lived for a year and a half with Sian Hornick, an alcoholic prostitute with a young daughter, who had a second child in the meantime, Vincent's family opposed their cohabitation for a change. Van Gogh's artistic journey really begins around 1880. He was already 27. Indeed, virtually all his work, comprising nearly 1,000 paintings and hundreds of drawings, would be produced in the last 10 years of his life. In 1881, Vincent began painting in the studio of his cousin's husband Anton Mauve, who was the main creator of the then successful Hague School. Van Gogh's paintings from that time are dark and very often represent the troubled lives of poor people and their suffering. This is also true of Vincent's first really great work, The Potato Eaters, from 1885. In the same year, his brother Theo writes to Vincent from Paris, telling him that he has a potential buyer and to send him some of his works. Nothing sells. Vincent is angry with his brother, but he replies that his dark tones have no chance of success in impressionistic Paris. This de facto sets the stage for a fundamental change in Van Gogh's style. In March 1986, he comes to Paris to visit his brother, and they move in together. Less than a year later, Theo would describe their cohabitation as almost unbearable. But here he introduces Vincent to the Paris bohemians of the time, and creates the first works that bear his, now much admired, signature. At the beginning of 1888, Vincent moves to Arles. The quarrels with his brother, his closest person, were already too painful for both parties, but they never brought about their estrangement. Theo and Vincent continued to exchange hundreds of letters, thanks to which Vincent's life is now as well documented as the life of a sick and much-suffering soul can be. There were other reasons for moving south. Vincent's physical health was also failing. This was due to his unbridled drinking, especially of absinthe, his almost constant smoking and his desperate lifestyle, living for months without hot food. Theo never stopped sending him a regular allowance, but Vincent spent most of the money on paints and painting equipment. In Arles, Van Gogh's talent was reflected in many of his masterpieces. Vincent painted portraits, still lifes and scenes from life. But most importantly, he walked the countryside and captured the local nature in a unique way. But Vincent's entourage doesn't want the strange painter as part of them. They're afraid of him. After the incident with the severed ear, the citizens of Arles petitioned to have him institutionalized. In the spring of 1889, Van Gogh arrives at the Saint Remy Hospital for the Insane and spends a year there. The thing he suffers the most here is that he can't go into the open countryside, so he paints still lifes, a hospital yard and a garden, and returns to some older motifs, both his own and those of other painters. In the meantime, the first critics notice his work in Paris, but no one is interested in buying his paintings. Vincent was released from the hospital in May 1890. He moves to the small town of Auvers-sur-Oise near Paris to be closer to his brother. In 2 months, he paints over 70 paintings there. And then the day comes when Vincent goes out to paint in the fields as usual, and in the evening he suddenly returns to the inn where he was staying with his stomach shot through. He tells the policeman who comes to investigate the incident, "Don't blame anyone. I wanted to commit suicide." This is also the official version to this day. However, the whole case has many uncertainties, and so later scholars are inclined to the conclusion that Vincent was accidentally shot by local youths. Either way, it does not change the fact that Vincent was resigned to his departure from this world. His battered soul just couldn't take it anymore. Moreover, he felt very strongly that he was an unmanageable liability to his brother Theo, who had recently married and has a 6-month-old son. Theo arrives in Auvers-sur-Oise as soon as he receives the news of the accident. Vincent van Gogh dies in his arms on July 29, 1890, aged just 37. The unhappy Theo, who himself would die just 6 months later, would write that Vincent's last words were, "Grief will last forever."